force of one. His next shot has to be his best shot, because he doesn't get another chance. To stop the killer, he has to think like a killer, only faster. He's the only one who can stop the killing. Chuck Norris, Jennifer O'Neill, A Force of One, rated PG.
The production of A Force of One was a normal shoot. We shot it on location in San Diego because American Cinema at the time was based in Del Mar. And we thought that would be nice. And we were shooting in the winter, and it was one of the rainiest winters in the history of San Diego, but we got through that. And it was really a good production. I think it went very well, and the results speak for themselves. Good picture. Ted Post, of course, came with tremendous credentials, and he had directed the biggest stars in action-type pictures, and people had confidence in him. And so I asked him to direct A Force of One, and the initial script we had wasn't quite ready, and I asked Ted to if he would work with me on that, and he's a busy guy with a busy schedule, and he really couldn't. So we brought in another director by the name of Paul Aaron, who had really only done one picture at that point. That was a different story. To work on the script and develop the script. And as time wore on, as he tried to make the script fit Chuck more and understand Chuck, Paul got a better feel for that genre of movie. Chuck got a better feel for Paul, and it ended up that Paul directed that movie, and he was very easy to work with, and things went very smoothly.
Initially, I wasn't going to direct this movie. I was simply going to do a rewrite. So I went to meet Chuck Norris because I said to Al, what I know about martial arts is simply having gone there with my son when he was 12 and watched every Bruce Lee movie ever made so that he could talk back to the screen and then come home and kick the heck out of the living room. So that was my knowledge. I said, you got the wrong guy. I can do a different story. I'm the love story guy, not the kick-ass guy. I wound up doing the rewrite. And for instance, took out the love story, added the kid, because I realized the hardest thing I think for any actor to do is to play love scenes. There's another person, you don't know that person, you met him the day before, and suddenly you're making love. And that was why I cast Jennifer O'Neill, because she plays a very kind of cold, edgy, tough female character. Not all soft and rounded and someone that you think, oh gee, you want to snuggle with. So that the romantic relationship wasn't ever going to have to make Chuck uncomfortable, nor was he ever going to have to relate to her on that level. I realized Chuck loved kids, and that if I could create a young character for whom he was Chuck's protege, Chuck was his mentor or adopted father, and there was that relationship, that would be a deep enough love that Chuck would be totally comfortable playing. And that he would be able to do that almost John Wayne moment of looking into the camera and saying, after protesting all the way through this movie, I won't, I'm retired, I'm not going to do this, it would give him a reason to turn and say,
whoever did this is as good as dead.
And indeed, at that moment, having seen it a lot of times with audiences, the audience goes nuts.
One of the first pictures that we produced was A Force of One. Funny story on that one I'll give you is, at the end of the story, Chuck takes the bad guy's neck and sort of breaks it. And we had a sound effect, which the MPAA told us was going to give us an X rating at the time because it was just a little too extreme. And I remember going back and we asked that if we removed the sound effect and treated it musically, would that be acceptable? And they said, yes, absolutely, it would be acceptable. Richard Halligan also did the score on A Force of One, and the musical effect that he added for the breaking of the neck was a ratchet, which was far more intense than the previous sound effect. But because it was a musical effect, we did get the rating of R.
Casting is so much a part of any director's job. I always say if I'm teaching that it's like giving a dinner party. You're the one who selects the guests. None of them know each other. But if you're good at that and you're a good party giver, then you know how to put a group of people around a table who will all somehow be the right group.
And again, A Force of One, that whole cast was a good cast to work with. Ron O'Neill and Jennifer O'Neill, not related, and of course Chuck. And Jennifer had just come off of another picture where for that role they cut her hair totally short. And it worked beautifully in A Force of One because she's a policewoman, so it was a whole different look for her. Clu Gulager is a great guy, great to work with. He's just, what you see on the screen is what you get. He's real people. He's a good guy, enjoyed working with him.
My recollection is this. I'm from Oklahoma. Chuck's from Oklahoma. In Oklahoma, we dream a lot. And when you dream a lot, sometimes you tend to become creative. Not necessarily in an artistic way, but in Chuck's case, and in my case, we went the creative direction. You say, well, was he a great actor? He can't do anything that other people can't do. I think he can. I think he can do a heck of a lot more than most actors I've ever worked with. I worked with John Wayne one time. And you talk about focus, man. And Chuck had that same kind of ambience, of focus I'm speaking of. Does he get it from Oklahoma? Like I started this discussion with, maybe. Get it from his parents? Maybe. You get it from martial arts? Some of it. I know that. He'd be killed if he didn't. He was never killed. He was a champion, the best of the best. That's what I remember about Chuck. That's what I can say about Chuck.
Aaron Norris, who has produced actually Chuck's series and is himself now a director, was terrific. A kid, then very young, and Chuck's younger brother, and he was kind of there, and he was part of the stunt coordinating team, and he had a small role, and he wanted to learn everything, and was a great kid and very helpful. So even in terms of having someone who was focused not on the acting or the movie making at that moment, but on the martial arts, then I had someone besides Chuck whom I needed to concern himself more with his acting at this point, more with the through line of a character and the evolution of a character so the audience cared than I did about the specifics of the fighting.
When we did A Force of One, there was a lot of interest across the country in his next film. So it was easier in ways and more difficult in others because once again we were growing and we had to kind of reinvent ourselves. You can't do the same thing twice. You had to come up with new gimmicks, new things to do.
We sent him on tour all the time. It was, the audiences loved him. He was a real guy. He wasn't a movie actor, and he didn't really come off as a movie actor.
I think with The Force of One, we fine-tuned what our activities were. We reached out to the community even further in terms of working with karate organizations throughout the entire U.S., putting a bigger, which also then garnered additional publicity, not with just the karate enthusiasts, but with the general publications as well.
What we tried to do with the campaigns was to take the real strong action parts of the film that related to the action crowd, the late night prime kids from 16 to 24 who were, that was our slot. That's where we went after. So we had, everything was action.
The score for A Force of One was recorded at Bell Sound Studios in Hollywood, California. It's a Hollywood score. The way that I approached Force of One, there was so much particular action using the karate stuff and all that the difficulty for me was how to write music that underlined that. I selected the studio based on having worked a lot there before on other projects, commercials and various things, and I liked the people, and I thought the engineer was very good. So that, for me, that's the most important thing, really. The Force of One is basically live musicians, real actual people playing in the studio. But not necessarily all together, because the studio I liked to work at was small. So, so we did the rhythm and percussion, and then we did brass and winds, and then strings. An action film could take longer in that the music is, there are more notes to write, because the music is usually faster paced, and that requires more measures of music to be written, so more orchestration. There's more synchronization, specific synchronization that would probably occur, accenting certain things more often than, let's say, in a romantic film where the music would tend to be broad and more lyrical. There were some scenes in slow motion, I remember, slow motion, and with action but using slow motion. For that, I remember using rhythmic stuff, but at a tempo that's slower than would normally be played, so that it had effect of holding back or of creating this tension. The composer has to contribute a point of view, some kind of point of view to the film, which can only be done by understanding what the film's about, really.
One of the things about making films then as opposed to now, not that I'm saying we need to cry for the good old days, but clearly a film really did exist in a director's mind. You had to have put that movie together in your own mind, and you knew why you were shooting what you shot. Unlike now, when you can put the video camera there and kind of almost pre-shoot it to see what you're going to get on video, there was no such luck. You could look through your lens, your viewfinder, to see what you were going to see, but basically you were composing this as it went and had to, with handheld and Steadicam had just come to be at that time. So we used Steadicam, and I remember that was somewhat experimental at the moment, and everybody was concerned about it floating in different fields and what have you. But in terms of the fight and getting into it, and especially the one that happened in at night after they leave the ring, the big fight, which we shot, say a funny story, we shot that in the Malibu Mountains. Now, I was fairly new to California. I'm a New York baby. So I'm out here thinking I'm in Southern California. Southern California can only get so cold. I mean, I know cold. I've been in Manhattan. I don't think in my entire life, growing up in the snow, I was ever as cold as the wind coming off that ocean in January in the mountains in Malibu. Both actors were bare-chested because the whole concept was, right, they ran out of the ring. They're chasing each other. So they are barefooted because they're from the ring and bare-chested. Well, not only did they both break out in whatever cold gives you so that they could barely move, but you could see breath. I mean, it wasn't, and I am there in this huge coat, and I keep asking wardrobe to give me something. I was so bitter cold, and we're shooting at night, so this was an all-night shoot. These poor guys, I ordered stoves and things, and they could shoot for maybe 2 minutes, and then we'd thaw out, and then we'd get 2 more minutes, and we'd thaw out. And so that was my kind of learning about Southern California and how you say to the, maybe we should not shoot there at night in January, probably not good. Everybody wanted to make the best movie they could within the parameters we were given. Nobody at that point in time ever thought we were anything other than lucky to be actually rolling cameras, making movies, doing what we did. If you had 18 days to do it, you did it in 18. If you had 21, you did it in 21. And everybody worked very hard without, as I remember, we had very little problem. I think also with films, and as I remember A Force of One, it was the first in those films for Chuck. I think people felt they were making a good film, and that he was going to be a franchisable character, that what he was doing he would do more of, and everybody thought, well, if he does 12 more movies, I'd like to be part of those 12 movies. You get people to work very hard and very well and put a lot of, I think, good effort into it, because they're not being abused, so there's no reason why you get any other feedback. And we had a good time.